One. This week on The Big Show, it's Halloween weekend, and we salute the scariest movies of all time. Charles Kirkland and I will discuss and debate some of the scariest films ever made. Plus, we remember the cinematic life of Sir Sean Connery, the man who originated one of Hollywood's most enduring icons, super spy James Bond. In addition, show correspondent Wilson Morales will recap the week in entertainment, and we'll have all that and more on episode 424, Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. Let's go. All right, and welcome to the latest episode of the home edition of The Big Show, Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. I am Tim Gordon. I am joined by my man, 50 grand, collar shirt around his neck. It is none other than first place in the NFC East, fan of the 1-1 Maryland Terrapins, Charles Kirkland Jr. What's up, bro?
What's up? Just for your clarification, we are not number one in the NFC East. We are in a tie for second place because the Eagles had that tie that put them in first place.
You know, this is one of those cases where you just go with the bit, man, and just be in first place. Your team is ahead of mine, so congratulations, man. That's all I was trying to tell you.
Yeah, our quarterback has an opportunity to run and not fall over his own feet as he's going into the end zone. I don't, we just bless that.
Too much information, people. Too much information. Welcome to our show today. As I said at the top, it's Halloween weekend. Wilson Morales will join us in a little bit, and we've got some scary films, man. They're scary to me, and for a person who doesn't like horror, I was surprised at how many films I have seen over the years, which is probably the reason why I don't like horror. I mean, it's because it's like I've seen some stuff, and I'm like, ugh. So what about you, Charles? What are you feeling about today's topic? Are you a big horror guy?
You know, I think I am a pretty big horror guy. I like horror movies, but there's a certain dynamic. I can see a horror movie in the movie theater, and I'm perfectly fine with it. And it doesn't scare me as much as when you watch it at home in your own little space in front of your television with no one else around. It gets a little bit more scary there. But you know, I have my go-to movies. That I've seen.
Yeah, it's funny, man, because I'm exactly the same way, man. I mean, sometimes if it's really scary, I got to watch it in the daytime because you can't really watch it at night. But we're going to get to Wilson, as I said, momentarily. But before we get to Wilson, man, I just wanted to remember Sean Connery, man. I mean, I got the news this morning. I was on a call. I do a weekly men's call with a group of brothers every week, and toward the end of our meeting, I was like, oh my God, the alert just came in, man. Sean Connery passed. But I just wanted to acknowledge for fans that Sir Sean Connery passed away early this morning at the age of 90. He was the first actor to play James Bond on the big screen in Dr. No in 1962. From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, and Diamonds Are Forever followed. While people and I really, it's stamped into my memory that he is the greatest person to ever to take up the mantle of James Bond. The film role that I think I loved him the most in was his Oscar-winning turn as James Malone in The Untouchables, opposite Kevin Costner, and of course with Robert De Niro as Al Capone. Sean Connery was an amazing actor. Unfortunately for him, he was probably one of the first examples of somebody being typecast into a role, because no matter what else he did, he was always James Bond. And he also set the bar for all the actors that came after him. Roger Moore, George Lazenby for one Bond film, Pierce Brosnan, trying to think, who am I leaving out? Daniel Craig. Am I leaving any other Bonds out?
Timothy Dalton.
I knew I was leaving one Bond out. So, but to me, he is James Bond. He originated the character, and everybody who's doing it is doing a variation of what Sir Sean Connery put on the screen. So, Charles, what are your feelings about the life of Sean Connery?
Wow. I'm much the same to you as you said. I think Sean Connery to me is James Bond, and all the others who come behind him have been more gimmicky or whatever you want to call it. But I think he was the one who was really the super spy, cool guy who knew how to talk to the ladies and get what he needed out. I mean, he was more of a strategist than the Roger Moore who was a gadget guy and all that kind of stuff. So I really enjoyed him as James Bond, and that's what he'll mostly. But he did break the role, I think, as he went on, and he won the Oscar for playing in The Untouchables, which was directed by your guy Brian De Palma back in, and you know, I mean, he got an Oscar for that, and so whether it's Con Air or whatever, I mean,
The Rock,
The Rock,
a bunch of the different movies
all
he
these
did.
other movies he's done, he's tried very hard to break out of being James Bond, but yeah, he's always going to be James Bond, and the best James Bond at that. I think Daniel Craig comes close.
Yeah, I think Daniel Craig to me is now moved into the second spot. Pierce Brosnan is probably my third favorite Bond. But like I said, I think the power of his work in the Bond franchise is so strong that everybody who came after him was measured by Sean Connery. Well, yeah, he's cool, but he ain't Sean Connery. Sean Connery was a little. Yeah, I'm telling you, man, Connery. For people, if you're watching the show and you're young and you have not had an opportunity to see his work in that series or to see a lot of his acting work, you should check it out, man. That is a fine actor who has left us. He's an Oscar winner. He is an iconic. He took on an iconic role. He is a very special actor. We remember on this show, The Life, all show long, we dedicate this show to Sir Sean Connery, who passed away this morning at the age of 90 years old. And with that being said, Charles, it is time for us to go to Gotham, because every week on the show, this man that we're about to introduce recaps our week in entertainment. This brother right here, I tease him a lot, man, but I have a great deal of respect for his knowledge, his ability, his access, his drive. I mean, you know, you got a lot of folks, man, who are young and are in the game, can take a lot of examples by watching our guy who honors us every week by appearing on our show from blackfilmandtv.com, as well as his own site, Wilson Morales Movies. I always get that confused. I want to say Wilson Morales Movies and Film.
So it's blackfilmandtv.com. That's the only website. On my Instagram, Wilson Morales Film.
I mess this up every week, Wilson.
Yeah, you do.
But you know what's funny? I actually do it on purpose so that you can clarify for people who have that question.
There's only one website, Black Film and TV. As far as social media, that's the same words. I do have also my own personal IG, Wilson Morales Film. Apparently,
Charles, you see what I did there, Charles? You see how he has to explain?
I saw that, and that was cool. I'd like to say to Wilson, I appreciate the fact that you're bespectacled this week. You got your glasses on with the rest of us. There's been times when you take those joints off, but we appreciate the education.
Put those things back on. Wilson, man, what's going on? Welcome to the show, brother.
Not much, it's Halloween weekend, there's a lot more clarity of what's going on. There's not much happening in the theater world now that everybody's being pushed back as corona cases are rising up.
Yep.
With respect now going pushed to August of next year, it's a game changer because that takes Jennifer Hudson out of the Oscar race and conversation. So in terms of like Black films that may be in contention, right now you're looking at One Night in Miami, and you're looking at Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, and a few others, so it's a game changer. We don't know where things are going to stand, obviously, in terms of theaters, and everybody's putting their stuff on streaming channels, but they're, all of the big films are examining whether or not it's worth it selling to a channel. I think I saw some report that like MGM was considering giving the next James Bond film to Netflix.
Oh no, bro! They weren't giving it to him for $600 million. Yeah,
like not giving it, more like wrong word, but more or less like they were considering selling it for like $600 million, because a movie like James Bond, as we all know, because we talked about it already, or as we talked about, the death of Sean Connery, it's a 20, 30-year-old, no, 40-year-old,
50,
50-year-old
yeah.
franchise that has built up an audience as it continues. And with the death of Sean Connery today, people will be examining, like, well, let's go back. This is a good reason to start catching up on the first 7 films, because remember, there was one film in between that he didn't do, and what Sean Connery meant to the franchise, what Daniel Craig continues to mean to the franchise.
He means everything, man. I mean,
it
seriously.
only ups the value of the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
The $600 million is not enough, because it's sort of like, listen, if we're gonna give it to you where a lot more people get to see it, MGM is going to want to make a profit of it. That had the movie come out in November as it was supposed to come out, every time they kept pushing it back, and if we had not had COVID, or if COVID had died down to a point where theaters were up to 100% capacity, it would have made close to $1 billion.
Yeah,
we are where we are right now.
It was the 25th film in the franchise. I'm thinking now, as you're talking, I didn't mean to cut you off, Wilson. I'm thinking as you're talking that somebody is literally going to have to write a $1 billion check in order to get that film. And I believe it's going to happen because, we're running into a situation, Wilson, where we have such a glut with so many movies being pushed back, and still the uncertainty of we don't know exactly when folks will be comfortable coming back in the theaters. So somebody's going to stroke that check, because you're right, man. I mean, that 25th film is worth a lot of money.
But, every producer who's got a big movie that's slated for 2021, they're examining it because they want to hold on. They don't want to lose their shirt after they've invested so much. So right now, any movie that's being made now are being made on a limited budget, whether it's in secluded areas in California or in Toronto or Vancouver. No one's doing, I don't think anyone's doing a big budget, because a big budget film requires a bigger audience in terms of the cast and crew. Right. And I think it may be too much to do in trying to adhere to COVID protection, especially when cases are rising up. I know there's 2 films being shot in Miami. They cloned Tyrone, I think it's a Netflix movie, and another movie that Brown Studios is doing. And they're in Mexico. I haven't looked up to see how's Mexico in that case related COVID crisis. So like any other movie is small, and anything small can be sold to a streaming services because it's not a lot of money invested. So like, okay, you want to get an audience to see it. No one's going to the theaters right now. You have a movie coming out next week called True to the Game 2, which is a sequel to a film that came out 2 years ago. I've seen it. I've spoken to the producer and said, why are you putting this out in theaters, considering, as a producer and as a director, you see that no one's really making any money off these theater films.
And the answer was?
His answer was, he wants people to have, he kind of skated around the issue and basically wants people to go to the theaters to see it. And I'm like, Warner Bros. Tried that with Tenet, and they're taking a hit, considering that's a big budget movie, and theaters are at 25% capacity without the services of New York City and California. So as much as people want to see movies, and they've got theaters willing to post it out, but what big theater is going to want to put it out? And when theaters do come back, right now I think they're operating at somewhere between 25 and 50%. When they decide to come back, as it starts to, hopefully COVID starts to die out a bit or die down a bit, and the amount of percent you can bring in the audience, they're going to want to fill it up with the big movies that's going to guaranteed sell. So if you have a James Bond and you're going to sell out because you can only put in 50 to 75 people per theater, per screen, you rather put James Bond in 10 of your 11 theaters, if not all of them, in order to make as much money as you can. And as I stated before, independent films are not going to have that luxury. And if you're the theater owner, I was like, I got 3 people coming in to see this. Unless this is the movie that everybody wants to see. It's going to sell out. Theater is like your best bet right now if you're an independent film is to be released on a streaming platform or VOD, where you can benefit by not having to worry about the box office. A lot of films go down because their numbers are so low because it's not as anticipated as they thought it would be. You know, a case in point, you know, you had The First Man that came out, I think 2 years ago, and was expected to have like 10 nominations. It was Damien Chazelle's film, Ryan Gosling, you know, and because it didn't do well at the box office, it died out. It had, you know, I think it got like 4 nominations on the technical side, you know, but if you had released it now without the benefit of box office numbers, people would be talking about it as they are talking about May. Netflix has opened up the gate where you can have films and not worry about its box office result, and people and its reviews are the only thing talking about it, because you've had good films, they've had great reviews, but no audience seeing it. You know, especially a lot of Oscar movies. You know, they've been nominated, but no one went to go see it. Right. But if they keep talking about how good it is, it always drives interest.
Right. Well, I was going to say to your point, Wilson, that I was just looking at last week's box office numbers. The #1 movie in America last week in theaters was The Honest Thief, the Liam Neeson film. It opened with $2.4 million. Why would you put a movie in a theater right now? And I'm not saying this, I'm saying this as a person, you know, there are 3 film critics on this Zoom call right now. And, you know, to a man, I think everybody to a certain extent misses the theater experience. I miss going to a place, seeing my colleagues, watching movies on the big screen. But at this point, man, there is no trust in you know, you going to the theater and staying safe. Secondly, there are no large movies in the theaters for that reason, because as Wilson said, you got 25%. I don't know of any place that's doing 50 unless it's some place that really is COVID ignorant, and we're gonna put half the theater and fill it up. That's not, I don't know. I mean, where we live in Maryland and in Virginia, I think we're at 25%. DC is still closed. New York is still closed. LA is still closed. So it makes no sense. And that's why I wanted to get an answer from you about this producer.
Movies can benefit. You know, think about it. You say The Honest Thief. I don't even know who distributed it. It could be, you know, it's not from, I don't think it's from any of the majors, but, you know, it's an action movie. Liam Neeson has, you know, he's over 65, I believe, and he's still doing these movies in which, you know, when you see a Liam Neeson movie like this, it's like, all you expect them is like, yo, just give me, you can play that movie on mute and get what's going on, you know, and that's, you know, and that's what he's been doing well with, you know, that's his bread and butter, you know. You know, obviously he's a good actor, you know, Schindler's List, you know, going way back. And then like somewhere along the line, you know, he did a movie called Taken that were like, wow, like you just put him in a whole new genre, a whole new lane.
He became the official old action white dude.
You know, he's Charles Bronson 2.0.
Pretty much.
And so like a movie like that, it's always going to have its built-in audience. And when you say what made it, between that, The War with Grandpa, you know, it's like people either want to laugh or they want to see action. You know, this is not some drama film that like, oh, people are looking to see it. It's like the star of this movie is Liam Neeson. You know, because you got other actors that you know of, but, you know, they're not bringing in, you know, an audience to them. It's Liam Neeson, you know, and if they can generate 5 to 10 and then go VOD, like, okay. But, you know, had it just gone VOD, how many people would have probably paid for it? You know, so they're taking their chances and say, listen, let's make a little money, you know, and then let's go on video and we'll get our profit from there. You know, some movies can play well on VOD, like The Trolls, because that's a kid film, and then it came out at the heart of pandemic when nobody was going anywhere and families needed something for their kids to watch. You know, outside of Netflix, I'm not hearing any reports from any other streaming platform that's charging for their films as far as how they're doing, you know?
Well, I mean, it's all built into subscription. Like, you know, for an example, it's Halloween weekend, so Hulu's got Bad Hair that's been released recently. So if you have Hulu, you can watch that. Black Box, I know, is on Amazon Prime. You know, we talked about some of these festival films that are going to hit streaming services over the next 8 weeks. You know, David E. Talbert's film Jingle Jangle. You got Sylvie's Love by Eugene Ash. You got Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, George C. Wolfe's film. So there's a plethora of content. And by the way, Wilson, have you heard anything on if Netflix has given a release date to Concrete Cowboy since they picked that up?
My assumption is that it's going to come out after February of next year.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because I was thinking, I don't
think it's an awards contender.
Okay, I see what you're saying. All right, that makes sense.
And I think, they know what they've got with Ma Rainey. I think they've seen other people write about Chadwick Boseman and Viola Davis. They've got Mank. They've got Hillbilly Elegy. They've got the George Clooney film. In the last 3 years, specifically last year, they've had an embarrassment of riches. And the question of how will they promote it? Last year alone, you had an Eddie Murphy movie. You had The Irishman.
Irishman,
how are they going to position them? So they rather take their chances on promoting. Also, they also have the Spike Lee movie they're going to promote again. So it's like
Five Bloods.
You don't want to have. You've got obviously from what I hear, they're going to put Delroy Lindo and Chadwick Boseman in the Best Actor category. They've got Gary Oldman in the Best Actor category. So it's sort of like for Concrete Cowboy, you can make the case for Idris Elba or the kid from Stranger Things. And it's like, where do you put them? Right. Somebody's got to lose out because you have other studios, like Amazon and Paramount, Hulu, they're going to campaign as well. It's not assumed that everything's going to be on Netflix, So they rather, they rather know ahead of time it can be released next year. And, Netflix also picked up, the Vanessa Kirby film, and they also have the Halle Berry film. So at the end of the day, it's probably in their best interest, like, hey, let's start spreading this stuff out to next year. We've got Jingle Jangle coming up. We've got Ma Rainey coming out, and they've picked up other films that's not necessarily theirs that they can promote. So
Charles, go ahead. What were you about to ask Wilson?
Well, actually, I wanted to return to. I wanted to ask this question about No Time to Die. Can you imagine what it would have been to have a montage for Sean Connery at the beginning of No Time to Die, released in November? People would have gone crazy for this.
You can do it now.
Or after the film. I mean, either way, it would have worked. I mean, because Sean Connery, as we've been talking about throughout the show, man. I mean, he played in a lot of things, man. But he was probably, to me, the first actor who was really in our modern era typecast into a role. I mean, no matter what he played, he was always James Bond, and I mean, it's not a bad thing.
All right, you tell me. And I don't know my research because I haven't even started it yet.
Right.
That when he did James Bond in 1962, and then the follow-up, was that the first franchise?
Correct. Yeah.
Was it?
It was.
I don't know.
It was. I mean, nobody had ever. I mean, it's funny because I remember reading or interviewing Pam Grier years ago, right? And she talked about when she made, I don't know which one came first, Coffee or Foxy Brown, but she basically said that was supposed to have been a series, a franchise, and nobody understood franchises at that time. So Bond was a series of books. So I don't think they thought of because nobody used the phrase, this is the Bond franchise. They just were making these different Bond movies, and they were all connected because it was the same guy movie after movie. So it really was Hollywood's first franchise that before they even had a phrase called a franchise.
Yeah, and it wasn't as actor-packed.
Well, go ahead, Charles.
I mean, you had films like Charlie Chan, and maybe Sherlock Holmes back in the day. They were but nobody. But again, like I said, I think those movies came out, and I know they were almost in serial form. The what do you call them? Charlie Chan films. Yeah.
They were like serials back in the day. But I'm talking about, like I said, in our time, in like the modern era from 1960 on, I would consider that to be the forerunner of what we now look at as film franchises. And it's been going on. It's 50 years old. I mean, think about that for a second. You don't have 50 years of of what's a good franchise that we have right now? We don't have 50 years of Lord of the Rings.
How old is Doctor Who?
Oh man,
Doctor Who has been around a long time, but
Doctor Who's been around too, but it's not. But Doctor Who's not on the same level as James Bond.
That's television, yeah.
007.
They've had a number of people play them, and there's always still a franchise to that. Right. In terms of who's playing Doctor Who, it's not like it's Star Trek and somebody's playing James T. Kirk over and over again.
Right.
You've got one person playing, several people over the years playing Doctor Who on television that's gone over for 30 to 40 years, 40 years if I'm right. Whereas James Bond, it's James Bond and whoever dons that. We've had Sean Connery, George Lazenby, Sean Connery, George Lazenby,
Roger Moore.
Roger Moore, that's 3. Timothy Dalton, 4. Pierce Brosnan, 5.
Dalton.
And Daniel Craig, 6.
Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
No, and don't forget Peter Sellers. He did it the first Casino Royale. So I mean, that's I don't know. A lot of people don't.
That was. Yeah.
I mean, it was more of a spoof James Bond, but it was James Bond.
But did he play the character James Bond?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the Lazenby one is the one that people always get thrown off. 1969, I forget what it was called, but I watched it once.
Her Majesty's Secret, I think it is.
Yeah, look, Wilson.
Majesty's Secret Service, yeah.
Yeah, nah. He was married in it. It was like, nobody wants to see a married.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, man, it was. And did she die in there or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't.
I have my collection. I think I have on DVD, maybe VHS. My collection is, every year there's always, or every couple of years there's always like 4K edition, Blu-ray edition. The Japanese laser disc. Remember those?
Oh yeah, but Wilson, I was telling James. I was telling Sean about his role in the Untouchables, and I never forget that scene, man, where he said, we're gonna do it the Chicago way.
I may look for that tonight.
Connery was great in the Untouchables, man. That's probably the one role. He played a lot of different stuff like The Rock and all that other stuff, but I really loved him in the Untouchables. I like that movie a lot. Because I love Brian De Palma.
The music by Ennio Morricone, and back then, I remember, here's the funny thing about me seeing The Untouchables. Came out in 1987, and I was in high school. And I guess I wasn't going to the theaters as, I'm 17 years old, and I guess I didn't have a lot of money and going to the theater. It wasn't like I was going to the theaters on a regular basis. And back then, you had the bootleg VHS tapes. And somebody had given me
are you using the B word on our show, man?
Somebody had given me a copy of that movie, and it was clear as a bell. But here's the funny thing. I saw that movie, and it was in black and white. And I'm thinking, like, this movie's amazing. They shot this in black and white, And I was like, clear as a bell, And it was passing around my classmates. Yo, Touchable, Sean Connery, Kevin Costner. Was not a big name at that time because Dances with Wolves didn't come out till 3 years later.
Right.
And Andy Garcia was the new face on that screen. Now I wasn't into the movies back then to know who's who. Obviously, you just knew Sean Connery, and Robert De Niro. You forget Robert De Niro played Al Capone. All I remember is individual achievement.
With a baseball bat in his hand.
Like if there are iconic scenes, he goes, individual achievement. It's like,
hey man, you're gonna make me find the Untouchables tonight.
If you remember, you know what? If you remember New Jack City when Nino Brown is around the table,
Yeah.
And
Same thing.
It's like where they got that from.
Yeah.
You know where they got from. He instead of the bat, he uses his cane like like that. Also in Snowfall. There's always a comic scene that they replicate in other areas, But that movie, Ennio Morricone, and that was I think my first discovery of Ennio Morricone because the music was just like sometimes the score of a movie makes you like a film more even if the film is not critically great, there's been a lot of scores, and I had done a radio show based on the scores of music, where you just listen. That score was great. The movie may be so-so, but like, hey, you just want to hear it.
Well, what would be a good idea is if you just play the score and go name the movie, because the good ones you can do that with. Like, we know Jaws, and we know, Indiana Jones. You know a score. Once Upon a Time in the West. I mean, these are iconic scores in Hollywood history. Star Wars.
Between John Williams, James Horner, Ennio Morricone, you got a
Bernstein.
It's like even my I think my ringtone is Bernard Herrmann.
Another one, man. I mean, Bernard Herrmann. He did Taxi Driver, right? If I'm correct.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, man. Yeah. See, Tim Gordon, man. Tim Gordon and that film knowledge, man. This is what happens when you immerse.
One of my favorites of nowadays is Carter Burwell. He does a lot of great stuff.
That is really. Yeah. Kill Bill is your ringtone, man. All the movies, man. That's the one.
The funny thing is, he had done that before Kill Bill.
Yeah.
That's where you know it mostly from.
Right.
That's where you know it mostly from.
Wilson, I'm not gonna mess with you, man. It's Halloween weekend. We having a Sean Connery love fest right now. We need to get to some of these scary movies, man. So before we let you go, Wilson, I've got a list that we got from Esquire. They had the 60th scariest movies of all time, and of course they left some out, which were a lot of African-American versions. So since we got Wilson on the show, we got to talk about Candyman, Death by Temptation, which is a movie that I saw that probably nobody else saw in like 1990. A young Samuel L. Jackson, James Bond III, which is his real name, James Bond III, the actor, about a guy who comes from a small town. He comes to New York. His best friend is Kadeem Hardison. There's a woman who is at a bar and just nightly picks up men, brings them home, and kills them. She is a succubus and an evil spirit. And it freaked me out at the time because I was like in my mid-20s, and I was the dude at the club. I was like, wait a second, I can actually meet him. So Death by Temptation is a movie that always was scary to me. As I said, Candyman, Tales from the Hood, 1995. And then one film that didn't make the list, but I think had an indelible imprint on me when I was a kid, was two of them actually, was Blackula and Abby. Abby, and when they were both takeoffs, Blackula is a takeoff of Dracula. Abby was kind of a takeoff of The Exorcist. So that's what my list, Wilson. Were there any black horror movies, man, that really scared, as we call it, the bejesus out of you?
I can't think of like black horror films at the moment that would say, that would, scare you. I think, over time, you see a lot of these movies and they have the jump scare moments. When I think about like what movie scared you growing up, there's an old movie called Black Widow. That starred Tony LeBlanc, I believe it is, or Tony Francesco, I'm not sure, and Patty Duke. Those movies that played, if you remember, if you're old enough, on ABC and CBS that played at 11:30 at night. When they used to play. Remember the William Shatner spider film?
No, I don't remember that.
You remember that William Shatner spider film? That they would play. They would play all of these horror movies at night on ABC. Like he's at 11:30 at night or midnight. When they would play, and CBS was good at that stuff, playing them like on a Friday night. And those are movies where you watch, but you don't know where it's going. I think when you're watching a scary movie and it's designed as a scary movie, you know what to expect. You kind of purposely go and see it knowing you want your wits to be scared, like to be jump out. We think about, say, movies like Vampire and Brooklyn, I'm like, that wasn't that scary.
Nah, that was funny. Yeah, that wasn't scary.
Comedy.
Or movies where you talk to the screen and you're like, now they're just kind of playing with us, when we're talking to the audience, like, what is he doing? like the way you were doing on Us. When you're watching that
Right.
movie, you're like, look at this idiot. you know, it's like, where are you going? So I can't pinpoint it now as far as what's been. I think Blackula, I would say, was was an interesting one. You kind of knew where it was, and it was a different take, and people still talk about it because of its title. William Marshall, I don't think he gets the recognition. One film,
Really
and
good actor.
the pop
Really
question
good
is,
actor.
what else did he do?
Really good actor, man. But since we got, and Charles, before I start going down a list of films, Charles, are there any that jump out to you when you were young, man, that kind of formed your basis of when you talk about scary movies?
If you're talking about African American horror films, I'm like, most of the stuff that came out was kind of cheesy and comedic. For me, in 1990, I think it was Tales from the Hood was one.
That was 95.
95. Tales from the Hood was one of those movies that really, I was impressed that it was a good horror film done with African Americans. Clarence Williams III as the mortician telling these creepy stories, right? It was a really good anthology, and I enjoyed that movie a lot.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, man, if we starting to talk about horror, man, we gotta start at what I call the granddaddy film. And I'll just essentially set it up by saying, when this movie was released, it caused such a sensation. People were throwing up in the theater, folks were passing out. There's an iconic scene which we here in the Washington metropolitan area, you can go right down to Georgetown right now. Those same steps are still there. I'm talking about 1973, The Exorcist, which was a movie that scared me to no end when I saw it the first time. And so, I talk about that. Also, 5 years prior to that, Roman Polanski made a movie that still raises the hair on the back of my neck. A pregnant Mia Farrow has a baby it seems like immaculate conception. Her husband, she moves into this apartment building with these really creepy neighbors, and everybody has this kind of this interest in this unborn baby, and we come to find out that this is Satan's baby and Rosemary's baby. And I think the iconic piece of this movie, Wilson and Charles, is at the end when everybody looks at the baby and they never show the baby to you. And your imagination, you like, what is this child look like? He has your eyes. Oh my God, pray for Rosemary's baby.
Now, was Jaws considered a horror film?
Jaws was considered a horror film. I didn't put it on my list because I didn't think, like, when we talk about scary movies, Jaws was scary, but it just was scary. Like, if I'm standing on dry land, Jaws can't get me. Like, a shark can't come to my house. So there's some fear that is like I'll give you an example, Wilson. There was a movie that came out in 1979, and since you're a lot younger than Charles and I, you probably don't remember this, but there's a famous scene where they're looking for the killer, and we've seen it spoofed, where you get the call and they go, the killer's in the house. And I remember going to see when a stranger calls. Man, I was like, whoa, the stranger's in the house. Get out the house.
Where does Scream rank in there? Scream.
I didn't put Scream on my list either, man, because Scream kind of was like comedic. When I thought about this list, I thought about movies that really scared me. Not comedically scared me. I'm talking about scared me. So I didn't put that on my list, man. The Witch from 2017. I saw this at Sundance. Did you see this movie about, I think what do you call them? Not pilgrims, but they were
Mennonites, something.
They're like Quakers, right. So they were living, this is like during the time of the Salem witch trials, and they're excommunicated out of their community, and they're living in a house in the woods. And there's this great scene, if you've never seen it, where the girl is playing with her baby sister, and she goes, I see you. She does this one time, and the baby is gone, and you see this little demon running into the woods with the baby. Man, The Witch was some scary stuff, man. That was scary. I was like, whoa, if I'd have known what this movie was, I would not have gone to a screening of this. That one made me think about it at night. So that was scary. That made my list.
It's interesting. It's Halloween on a Saturday, which is on any other, obviously pre-COVID, you'd have fun to play with because it's a Saturday. It's a great day. Of all days you want Halloween to be on, it's a Saturday because, everybody's home. No one's working. At least not enough people are working. But obviously, the restrictions have been placed where like, okay, we don't want people walking in the house, and you certainly don't want to be taking people's candy. It's like,
I got one more for Wilson, man, because Wilson, of course, is a Spike Lee Do the Right Thing fan. So in Do the Right Thing, of course, we had Radio Raheem with The Rings, Love and Hate. Remember that? Well, the movie that Spike Lee got that from was a movie from 1955 directed by Charles Lawton called The Night of the Hunter. And it was the first and only film that Charles Lawton ever directed about a charlatan preacher played by Robert Mitchum, who overhears that one of his cellmates has $10,000 that he has stolen. He goes back, marries the guy, kills the guy in jail, marries his wife, and then kills her and terrorizes her kids dressed as a pastor in that famous eerie scene where he's chasing the kids and he's singing, leaning. It's like, very creepy. Wilson, if you've never seen Night of the Hunter, please watch that. I promise.
I remember these movies, and now I'm telling myself, do I have time today?
Oh my God.
Night of the Hunter. I've got Scariest I got to catch up on.
Yes, you have time, man. It's called being a film aficionado, man.
Yeah, but the fact is, it's sort of like, you say to yourself, like, I tend to watch my movies so late when I know I'm not going to be distracted, and it takes a lot of discipline to kind of watch anything, 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You set us up for 2 hours. I don't want to get any phone calls. I don't want to hear any news. During the week it's tough. During the night it's like, okay, we're home to begin with.
Time.
Untouchables is like, I rather see Untouchables again because I want to see that performance. When you just sit back and you watch it. Like, I just watched a movie last night starring Kevin Costner called Let It Go.
Oh yeah. I got to get my hands on that one. I saw
Kevin Costner. There's a certain point for actors where they're no longer in high demand because of age. They no longer have that star presence for the big screen. And obviously, from the 80s, Kevin Costner, from the Untouchables to Dances with Wolves, for a good 7-year stretch, he was making it happen. And then he slid back a bit, and then he started to come back in supporting roles, where he started playing Clark Kent's father, and then he's made a comeback on Yellowstone. If you haven't seen Yellowstone, he's amazing in that.
Work.
And and so he's been doing these small, performances, where, and that's what you get with a lot of these actors. We're like, hey, listen, I'm not going to bring in that audience anymore to the big screen. But now, because I do have some respect, I am an Oscar, and let me bring them onto the small screen, and they'll do that. So like, so when you think about like, hey, remember Kevin Costner in No Way Out, and then you see him, with Sean Connery, going back to Sean Connery, Antoine Fuqua's one of his earliest films that he did not direct was Entrapment.
Right, he wrote that one. Right, I remember that.
Like, he was supposed to direct that, and I could be wrong, but I heard that there were some clashes because I believe that there was this thing about like, how can Sean Connery at age hook up with a young Catherine Zeta-Jones, And back then, Hollywood brought it, they, between Michael Douglas and, they always put the old guy with the young girl,
Yeah, the other part about Entrapment is I remember at the time that would have been the largest budget an African-American director, like say would have given a film, I would think the budget was like $120 million. And it was a big deal when Antoine Fuqua didn't get that. And I was like, man. So we've come a long way, Wilson. That's a good story. But that still doesn't obscure the fact that we are giving you classic horror movies that you have got to fit this in to your canon. You just can't spend all your time watching new stuff, because if you watch some of the older stuff, it will help inform.
I am, when I'm home and, and I'm flipping through channels and I got a gazillion of these and I'm on TMC, and, obviously when you flip through your channels, they give you like the title and what the stars it has, and then you're always intrigued with the movies that say 3.5 or 4 stars, and you read a synopsis, and you're like, oh, okay, let me peek down and watch this. These are movies you've heard of, or sometimes you discover new movies. Like there's things there that are yesteryear. And that's the beauty about like a TMC is because a lot of these movies don't get played on TV. Like the other day, I saw Mank on through Netflix as a special screening, and a lot of the press colleagues are saying, oh, it's great, and yada yada, and they talk about Citizen Kane, and you're like, Citizen Kane does not get played on TV. I don't know who has the rights or whatever, and I guess the less it gets played, the more it gets talked about because it's not a movie that we've all seen over and over again. And today's millennials are not seeing Citizen Kane. You'd have to see it as part of a class, like the Searchers, John Wayne, the Searchers, and John Wayne has a whole new. He's lost the whole fan base, once based on things he said in the past, So there are a lot of movies out there, and I'm sure, obviously there's what's the movie, the black and white movie, the Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, we're getting ready to talk about that. So this is part of this. We can ready to kick you off the phone because Charles and I need to talk about these movies, and Wilson hasn't seen any of them.
No, I just don't. It's not. So you guys came prepared. You probably had a talk with Charles and like, oh, let's drop this. You had a list. You're probably looking at a list together, so that way you guys are in sync. You guys are trying to surprise me, and I'm like, oh, I don't remember this.
Let me tell you how he does this, Wilson. He gave me a list like 2 minutes before the show started of things that he's going to talk about. But I have to go strictly off the top of my head. And in your defense a little bit, When a Stranger Calls is a great movie, but you got to research to find it. It's not like it's playing on repeat on somebody's channel. You got to find that movie to watch, and it is a scary movie.
You got to find it. There's no longer like a Blockbuster. You got to find it to see if Amazon has it.
Can I just say something, because I just want people at home. I don't want to get sandbagged like I'm the preparation guy and nobody else is prepared. Charles Kirkland, if nobody knows, has sat in a room with me and watched me talk about classic movies. How many notes have I ever bought about any old movies I've ever talked about, Charles? You've sat there, honestly, tell the truth.
Never has notes. That's why.
No, I don't have notes. I watch movies. What are you talking about, man? That's why I'm like, I don't understand. I had a list that I pulled up from Esquire, but I took 40 of the movies that was 60 on the list and put them in the one spreadsheet. I mean, it's not like I sat here and spent the week researching this stuff. I watch movies, just like Wilson. Wilson, I respect, because when we talk about a black film space, I don't know of too many other people. Maybe Sean Edwards, maybe Wilson, maybe me. I don't know of too many other people. Do you know of any other people other than me and you and Sean Wilson who knows these films like we do?
I'm looking at a list right now of top horror films through Rotten.
Just saying.
And a lot of movies we've seen. A lot of.
Is Sugar Hill on that list from 1974?
Not top 100. They've got
Thomasine and Bush Ride,
Invisible Man. You mentioned Halloween, Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
Evil Eyes Without a Face.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
As you mentioned, The Witch.
The Witch.
The Birds.
The Bird. Yeah. That was kind of scary.
The Birds.
1963.
There's The Fly, 1958.
Had that on my list. Well, I had the remake with what's his name? Jeff Goldblum on it. That one scared me.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
I do remember that. I saw that.
There's the invasion of. I'm only mentioning movies that's like old, because the new ones.
Carpenter's. No, that's The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing was a scary movie.
So wait a minute. I got Cabin Fever, the Babadook, the original Suspiria from 1977. Let the Right One In. That was pretty creepy. Frankenstein from 1931. That scared me a lot. The Others with Nicole Kidman. Is that on the list?
The Others, I remember that because I remember, is it Alejandro Amenabar?
Yeah, Nicole Kidman, the family that's dead but don't know they dead. You could also put in The Sixth Sense.
That's a great movie.
You got Misery.
Misery with Kathy Bates. Yeah.
Misery.
And
The Wicker
James
Man.
Caan getting them ankles broken.
You know what's 28 Days Later.
28 Days Later, I had that on my list. What about Carrie? What about Carrie, the original Carrie from 1976?
The original Carrie,
What,
obviously.
what about
There's the,
what about the Mist?
which one?
The Mist?
The Mist.
I
Have
never
you ever
saw
seen
The
that?
Mist. I heard about The Mist. I never saw that one.
Oh man, this
Shining.
is a great.
The Shining with Jack Nicholson.
Someone had sent me a story the other day about some people, some scientists opening up a dimensional portal or whatever. I'm like, have they not watched a horror movie ever in their life to know that?
All right. Who do you choose? John Carpenter or Wes Craven?
Wes Craven, all day and twice on Sunday. I mean, no disrespect to John Carpenter, but Wes Craven, man, is like a master in the genre.
Yeah.
Wilson, first slasher movie, 1960, Psycho.
Can't go wrong with that.
First slasher movie, man. I mean, before that, man, nobody even knew what slasher was.
I remember there was like this whole drama.
That was the term. That's where the term came from where the slashing.
The slasher movie, man, from Psycho, when Ann Lee is slashed up by is her name Ann Lee? Did I mispronounce her name? Vivian Lee. I'm sorry. I thought I knew something about Ann didn't sound right, but Vivian Lee is slashed up by Anthony Perkins in that great film. And it was also a shock because the star normally didn't die that early in a movie, and to see the star die halfway through, you're like, wow. So
not even halfway.
Huh?
Not even halfway. It was like 15 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
And he starts saying, like, how much time do we have? Like, we got a whole hour? What's going on? And we still do that. You still do that when they take you out of the equation. It's like, wait a minute, there's a lot of time left. Where are we going with this?
Well, I was going to say a recent one that I thought was really well done was Drag Me to Hell, where the woman gets a spirit put on her, and wow. You never saw Drag Me to Hell, Wilson?
Who starred in it?
Oh my God, man. I couldn't tell you, man. and Drag Me to Hell came out like 5 or 6 years ago. So that's not old at all. That is right inside the Wilson Morales wheelhouse.
You're like, the end of that movie really gets you.
Oh, it does.
Everything is all right.
And today, the thing is, the longer we go on in years, and there's that old theory about there's only 8 scripts in Hollywood, so everybody's trying to reinvent the wheel as far as what is considered scary, and when Jordan Peele did his movie, he made it more of a psychological affair, and the old way is now considered like, okay, we've been there, done that, slasher film where it's like if you get a group of people in a movie, they're all gonna die except for the protagonist,
Right.
And it's like, how does the protagonist live? When everybody else around her is dying off like 10 little Indians, and it's almost like, and that's what you get now, and in this matter of like, okay, let's not make it so predictable. Let's just change it up, and it takes a good writer or writers of being creative, where it's giving so much red herring to the audience, where we don't know where it's gonna come, and like I said, everybody, it's the jump scares are the draws, it gets you in, but then when you throw in like the psychological affair of it, that's the intrigue part of it. So all the movies that you mentioned in the past, they're like, yeah, it could be scary because the character is menacing,
right?
Or or the house or the environment is the secondary character that sells, like the birds, or an animal, anything from that, like you think back to Arachnophobia, 1990,
Yeah.
No, but things things that we can be scared of, whether it be a rat or arachnophobia.
Right.
I don't think I've ever seen a horror film regarding roaches. Where you're like, what if the roaches started coming? And he's like, like one of those things where you're at night and you hear like what sounds like something, but it's actually the sound of roaches as a group.
Wow.
You start being creative. It's like, there's nothing there. You turn on your lights. There's nothing there. And then you turn on your phone light. You're like, oh.
Wilson is giving pitches now for movies.
That sounds like
there could be a script out there. They can put it together. Like, okay, now it's a matter of like, how do we play with the CGI, or do you get real roaches and train them?
Man, we got 5 minutes left in this show, and before we get out of here, one of the movies that I wanted to talk about was a movie I saw years ago, and I've only had this experience 3 times in my life before I became a film critic, where I saw a movie, liked it so much, and went back and rewatched it immediately. The first 2 times were Purple Rain in 1984, The Terminator, also I think it came out in 84. The third and final time that happened was a movie called Angel Heart. Mickey Rourke, Robert De Niro, and Lisa Bonet, and a story about a guy who hires a detective to find a guy who has breached the contract, only to discover that the guy he's trying to find is himself, who's been hiding his soul that Louis Cypher, aka Lucifer, is after. And the ending of Angel Heart, when he's on that elevator going down, wow. Now watch this, Wilson.
Funny,
you have seen Angel Heart.
Yes. It's funny you mentioned that, because there's a new movie that's out now called Spell. Directed by a British director, Black British director named Mark Tonderay. And when you look at the trailer, everybody's initial reaction is that it's a Black version of Misery.
Okay.
And I've interviewed him, and he said it's not a direct version, but there are references to Misery in there, because he says that the character's law firm is named after one of the characters in Misery. So if you know both, he was like, oh, okay. And he also, there's references to Angel Heart in the movie.
Great.
If you've seen enough movies, he says, oh, obviously everybody always wants to put in a reference, or everything sounds similar, whether you're looking at a Chinese version or a variation of a Chinese version or Black film or whatever, Like I said, they always say there's only 8 scripts in Hollywood, and it's like, how do you reinvent it? It's like, everybody has its own audience,
Man, so before we get out of here, go ahead, Charles. And then,
I love those movies that are meta like that. I think one of my favorite ones is the Cabin at the End, the Cabin in the Woods.
Oh yeah. I thought that was well done. I thought they did an amazing job with that one. But I'm gonna give out a list of films, and then we'll probably list this someplace. But and these are in no particular order. So for people who are looking for things to watch tonight or recommendations, there's The Witch, Suspiria, The Exorcist, The Babadook, Under the Skin, the Scarlett Johansson film from 2013, Death by Temptation, Cabin Fever, the original The Witches. They have a new version of Witches out now, but the original with Angelica Houston. When a Stranger Calls from 1979, Candyman from 1992, Tales from the Hood, Let the Right One In, the original Frankenstein from 1931, Freaks from 1932. Has anybody seen Freaks?
Not 1932.
Wow, boy, y'all are scaring me. The Others, 28 Days Later, Jordan Peele's masterpiece Get Out from 1979, Alien with Sigourney Weaver. The Strangers, I think that came out 2013, 2014. That was freaky. The Fly, the original in 1957, 58, or the 1986 Jeff Goldblum version, both work. Carrie, Wolf Creek, The Night of the Hunter, Psycho, The Shining that Wilson talked about earlier. We talked about The Last House on the Left, Night of the Living Dead, Rosemary's Baby, The Silence of the Lambs. Yes.
You know what? I never really considered The Silence of the Lambs to be a horror film.
Psychological horror, man. Okay. Halloween, which is today, and the movie from 1978, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Drag Me to Hell, The Conjuring, The Sixth Sense, The Ring, The Omen, It Follows, A Quiet Place, Angel Heart, and Christine. So that was the movies that made up the list of movies that I thought were some of the scariest imagery that I saw in movies. You had Jaws and some other stuff, like Wilson talked about. Jaws was scary when you heard the score, but common sense told me Jaws wasn't going to be hiding under my bed or in a closet because there was no water in my house. So I'm good. I'm good there. So any closing thoughts on scariest movies? And Wilson, I mean, you're talking about it from one perspective. Charles, I don't really know if we got your perspective on what you guys feel about these movies, or are these movies favorites of yours? I've told you they're not favorites of mine. I don't understand people who pay money to have somebody scare them when I can easily do it for free.
Everything tickles your own fancy as far as what you got. Like I said, when they throw out the horror films in there, you know, judging by the trailer, now horror films are its genre, and then they have the subclass, you know, as far as psychological horror, slasher film, you know, and all that. So it's like, you know what you're going to get out of it, you know, when you see these movies, and you know, you get your mind and your body mentally prepared for this stuff, you know, as far as like, especially when you have the jump scares, you know, you brace yourself, you're like, okay, you grab onto something. If not, you're just watching it unfold, whether or not some of these horror films can be seen as realistic, you know, like turning off the lights and, you know, you see something in it's not there, you know, like there's certain things that you may have experienced of like, okay, I can relate with this, or I can't, but I want to, you know, you want to not live vicariously through these movies, but like, okay, what's going to tickle your fancy? We all, you know, it's like either you get horror or you don't.
Right, right. Charles?
Wow. You know, I look at your list and I hear your list, and I think a lot of the things that aren't on the list, like there's some movies in there. I think I said in years previously, The Descent is one of those psychological horror films that has creatures in it that I'm surprised didn't make your list. So there's a different taste for everybody in all of this. So it's a good list, but there's some things that I would have on here that you just don't have.
I got you. I got you. All right. Well, gentlemen, you know, I normally would put film reviews in the show, but as of last week, I've started reviewing films separately. Wilson, I don't know if you had a chance to check out the FilmGordon YouTube page, where there's 7 reviews, and I'm going to probably put about another 10 up today, because there are these 5 to 8 minute kind of clips where you just sit there and break movies down. So you can check us out at YouTube, at FilmGordon. You can also check us out at the website, thefilmgordon.com. You will notice that there's no Charles Kirkland on there, but you know, Charles said he's going to get back on it. I did that on purpose because I've been teasing Charles all week. Like, man, there's no content for you on the page these days.
Just he's got to post what I send him. That's all that is.
Wow, man, I tell you, shots. Wilson Morales has promised that we're going to start seeing more interviews on the show. Thank you, Wilson, in advance. We put you on blast because now it's being recorded. Thank you, Wilson. You're too kind.
Yes, you know, it's just got to be I just got to split myself. Oh, send it to Tim.
Okay, so Wilson, before we let you get out of here, we do this every week, man. Tell people where they can read and
you can find me over at blackfilmandtv.com, which is what you find over on, you know, the website. You find it over at Black Film on Facebook, as well as Instagram and on Twitter. You know, I also have a separate IG account, which is Wilson Morales Film, but you're pretty much going to see both on both pages. So you follow Black Film and TV, you'll find what you need to look for in terms of the news, while I just keep informing you what's happening.
All right, brother. I appreciate you. And Charles, where can people read the content that you haven't been sending to us?
Well, you can find me at thefilmgordon.com most of the time. But I just want to say before we get out of here, don't forget Chipotle gives you half price for wear a costume in on Halloween. And Pluto TV has a 007 channel where you can watch all the 007 movies. You can go see Her Majesty's Secret Service on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Nice. All right, I got you. All right. Well, with that being said, we always tell you to see something good at the movies. We've been talking scary movies, and we've talked about the life of Sean Connery. Take your pick. There are plenty of good movies to choose from. And as I tell you guys in closing, see something good at the movies. And until next week, Wilson, you enjoy your brisk Gotham Saturday. Chuck, you keep on celebrating your victory. And I'll see you guys on the other side next week, man. You guys take care.
All right. Go Giants.